Hello. I'd like to share with you a little bit about my experience of the welcoming prayer. And hopefully it's going to be helpful and to show you that this is really a process that happens over time. I've heard it said that the longest distance a person will ever take is the distance between one's head and one's heart. And I would like to say for me, the welcoming prayer is really about developing a relationship with God at deeper and deeper levels, a way to consent to God's presence and action within in the course and scope of our daily lives. In 1996, I took an introductory workshop on centering prayer and joined a 12-step centering prayer group, went on a weekly basis, and we prayed together, did a 20-minute sit together, and then we watched the Spiritual Journey videotapes, and then we shared with how the prayer was impacting our lives. And during that first year, I was exposed to the welcoming prayer practice. There was a presentation given by an experienced welcoming prayer presenter, and she did a very good job of explaining the three movements of the prayer, the feel and sink into, the welcome, and then the letting go. And she talked about how it took a while for the prayer to take root in her life. And I remember listening to her very astutely and clear, and she was very clear, and I thought, boy, that would really be good. And what she said was that she knew the prayer, but it wasn't until her daughter had an accident, a car accident. Her daughter eventually fully recovered, but she said her daughter was in intensive care, and she would go to the hospital every day, day after day, and watch her daughter heal. And she said during those times when she was in the hospital, she would just sit with her daughter or stand at her daughter's bed. And she said she would just feel what she was feeling. The longing for her daughter, the fear of her daughter, the wanting her daughter to get well, the concerns about her future, the anxiety every time a doctor would come in. And she said, I would just let that wash over me. I started to feel my feelings in a different way. And she said, I just started practicing the prayer. I would feel the feelings. I would then welcome God's presence in those feelings, and then I would just let go. She said, I would let go of my desire for security, affection, control. And she goes, I was able to get into the present moment. And somehow during that process of her daughter's recuperation, she just started to get well. The prayer took root, and it became a part of her life. Well, I thought at the time, that sounds great, but the prayer was not taking root. What I was able to do during those years was I was able to go to my prayer group. I was able to read Thomas's books. I would do an occasional retreat, and I was faithful to my centering prayer group. I would describe my life at that time. My career was during the economic downturn, so there was a lot going on with my company, and I was kind of like a billiard ball, just kind of like bouncing off the borders of a pool table, just going back and forth. And I was longing for this prayer, the centering prayer, to give me some emotional stability, or I should say more emotional stability. And then I had an experience in 2001. I'll never forget the date or what happened. It was September 10th, 2001. And I had like a perfect storm. It was like there was stuff going on at work, and there was stuff going on in my home, and a triggering event, and I just reacted. I just kind of blew up. I was just surprised at the level of feeling that came out of me. It was like a little volcano, and really bothered me, and it really got my attention. And I thought to myself, here you've been practicing centering prayer for 5 years, and you're reacting like this. And of course, I did what I could to clean up my mess, and I made my amends and said my apologies, but it really got my attention. Also around that time, what happened was we started a 12-step retreat, a centering prayer retreat. And every year, we would bring in teachers from Contemplative Outreach, and they would give a presentation along with the introductory workshop to centering prayer. We would bring a teacher to talk about maybe the welcoming prayer the forgiveness prayer, the active prayer sentence. So I was exposed to the teaching and I kept hearing the teaching. But for those years, it was still like I was just doing my best to practice when I could. And this is what my centering prayer practice looked like. I would get to the end of the day, and I would think, I wish I wouldn't have gotten so upset. I wish I would have used the welcoming prayer. Or, oh, in that situation, if I had used the welcoming prayer, it would have been better. But it was conscious, and I was trying to incorporate it more and more in my life. Well, then something happened in 2011 where I was invited to do a online spirituality and practice course called the Welcoming Prayer, and it was given by the faculty of the Welcoming Prayer at Contemplative Outreach. And it was a watershed experience for me because I had been keeping up with all of Thomas's writings, and I knew a little bit about the human condition. There's even a little book about the human condition. But in these writings, some things started to come together for me. I started to make the connection between the body as the warehouse of the emotional wounds of our lifetime and our welcoming prayer practice as far as feel and sink into that experience. I started to understand the body as our body scan as a way to connect to our unconscious level of our being. And these little connections started to make a big difference. And by the end of the course, this is what happened. I realized that most of my life I had been running from my feelings. I had been running from my anxieties. I had been, and when I say running, I'm talking about trying to avoid, trying to control, trying to not feel certain things. And what I realized at the end of this course was that when these feelings came up, when these situations came up, that it was an opportunity to practice the welcoming prayer, that I could embrace these feelings, and this would be a way to heal these emotional wounds of a lifetime. And it changed everything for me. Not to say that my life got perfect, but when I was able to identify certain emotions in my body, I was able to, first of all, pause, feel them, welcome God's presence in the situation, and let them go. And just being present and having that choice made all the difference in the world. And what I noticed was I wasn't reacting like a billiard ball on a pool table. I just was able to be present to what was going on. So I encourage you to try the practice out, to try the body scans, to realize that you have the opportunity to heal your emotional wounds of a lifetime. I wish you well. I thank you for listening, and I hope to see you sometime.